Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to our respected lecturer Dr. Asno. So this video presentation is to review the scientific talk on a research in Antarctica focusing on global warming and climate change, which was given by Associate Professor Dr. Mohd Shahrul Mohd Nadzir from UKM in previous day. And he is one of the research team to Antarctica. But before that, I would like to introduce my team members, consist of Abdul Hazim, Muhammad Faris, Nur Fahana, myself, Nura Aini, and Shaznurin. Next. So first of all, in introductory part, we include problem statement, purpose of study, and also the study of Antarctica, which explain a little bit of data on global surface temperature. So the problem statement is immediate rapid declines in global warming would be expected if all greenhouse gas emissions were to be completely stopped. However, the world today is experiencing more of the devastating effects of global warming. The rising temperature has triggered many natural disasters such as floods, forest fires, and increasing sea levels, causing deep concern worldwide. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent in the world, and 98% covered in ice that can go as cold as negative 89 degrees Celsius. An increase of only 2 degrees Celsius for half a century is enough to adversely impact Antarctica surrounding the South Pole. And due to this problem, researchers from around the world are traveling to Antarctica to study the effects of global climate change. Next, the purpose of study. So the purpose is to study the effects of global climate change, and the other one is to study on how greenhouse gases affect global climate due to its ozone cleaning effects. And just to add some information regarding this, studying climate change in Antarctica is important because it enables scientists to predict more accurately future climate change and provide information to politicians and policymakers. And lastly is the study of Antarctica. Research in Antarctica is still so important, although the continent is very far away from most people's life. That is because Antarctica is a barometer of climate change. Scientists can expect future climate change and at the same time can dig into the past to fully understand the planet climate system for up to more than 1 million years by studying the ice core. And according to Living 2020, the Antarctica Peninsula is witnessing some of the most rapid warmings on Earth. In the last 50 years, the peninsula warmed almost 3 degrees Celsius, significantly higher than the global average of 0.9 degrees Celsius. Globally, according to the data of the change in global surface temperature relative to 1951 to 1980, recorded by MESA, 19 of the warmest years have occurred since 2000, with the exception of 1998. The latest annual average anomaly in 2020 is 1.02 degrees Celsius. So next, I will pass to Faris.
So this is the evidence of the climate change that introduced by our speaker, which occur in Alaska. So there are two glaciers, which is a Bear Glacier and the Peterson Glacier, which the picture shows from 1920 and 2005. So in 1920, we can see that there are many ice on the surface, but in 2005, there are no ice on the Earth surface. This shows that the Earth surface temperature is increasing and warming, causes the ice to melt, and no ice available there. So next. So before we go further, we need to know about our atmosphere. So Earth is actually surrounded by a thin layer of gases called an atmosphere, which is made up from the greenhouse gases. Atmosphere is important to reflect most of the dangerous light wave away from the Earth because it can harm many organisms on the planet. Atmosphere thickness will influence greatly the surface temperature of a planet. So as you can see at the right side, there are 5 layers of atmosphere on the Earth, which is the lowest one is troposphere, continuing by stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and the highest one is exosphere. Next. So this is the process of the greenhouse effect. So firstly, the sunlight pass through the atmosphere, but mostly will be reflected to the space by the atmosphere. Then the sunlight that reach the surface will be reflected back to the space. However, some of the sunlight that reflected back will be reflected again to the Earth's surface by the atmosphere, and this will make the light become heat. And the carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases are reversible to this process because they want to trap the heat and keep the Earth warm. Next. So there are two sources of greenhouse gases, which is a biogenic emission and anthropogenic emission. So biogenic emission is actually produced or brought by living organisms through natural processes. Although most of the greenhouse gases is from the biogenic emission, but it does not directly influence the climate changes. On the other hand, anthropogenic emission is actually the pollutants originating from in human activities, which mostly come from vehicles and industrial waste. These pollutants actually produce many dangerous gas that highly toxic and harmful, and they're the one who are responsible for most of the climate changes. Next. So this is an example of the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and ozone. So carbon dioxide, CO2, the function is to keep the earth warm by trapping the heat from the sunlight. However, human activities have caused many overproduction of carbon dioxide, which make the earth's surface temperature keep rising and lead to the global warming. Next is ozone. So the function of ozone, O3, is to reflect the UV light, which is dangerous for organisms. However, the anthropogenic emission release chlorofluorocarbons, or known as CFC, which proven by the scientists to cause a depletion of ozone layer. This will make the more UV light will penetrate through the atmosphere and cause harm to the organisms. Next. So this is the difference between the global warming and the climate changes. So global warming, what is global warming? Global warming is the increase of Earth's surface temperature due to the buildup of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere. So the high concentration of greenhouse gases in the troposphere, which is the lowest level of an atmosphere, will cause the more heat to accumulate in the Earth's surface and the atmosphere. On the other hand, the climate change, actually the long term of changes in climate, which related to the average temperature and precipitation. This means that climate change actually relate to the changes of the temperature in many years. It recognizes that although the average surface temperature is increasing, the regional or local temperature may decrease or remain constant. In other words, the global warming is under the climate change. So next. So this is a global warming. So I will explain about the main cause and the process. So the main cause of the global warming is due to the burning fossil fuels, which are mostly emitted by the vehicles and our industrial areas, which is the factories. So firstly, when humans burn the fossil fuel, which is mostly coal, oil, and natural gases, it will produce many carbon dioxide as a waste. So many of carbon dioxide gas will emitted to the air, And lastly, go to the lowest level of the atmosphere, which is troposphere. And the third one, lastly, the carbon dioxide will trap the heat between the troposphere and the Earth's surface and increase the Earth's surface temperature and lead to global warming. So I will pass this floor to the next presenter.
Okay, next I will explain the chemical process that somehow involved in this global warming. Okay, I will explain how isoprene influence the global warming, referring to this picture. So what is isoprene? Isoprene is a colorless, volatile, a liquid hydrocarbon obtained in processing petroleum or coal tar and used as a chemical raw material. The formula of this isoprene is C5H8. Before that, we can see from the picture that climate forcing agent, which are greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and hydrocarbon, warm the earth as well as the tropospheric ozone. As we all know, that the emissions of greenhouse gases come from the industrial sector and also from vehicles. This isoprene contribute to the formation of tropospheric ozone when it reacts with the atmosphere together with the nitrogen oxide and carbon monoxide. Generally, isoprene is a product produced by plants and trees which can increase the Earth's temperature but in a prolonged time. In the marine ecosystem, isoprene is higher at the place where can be found many phytoplankton. Thus, it can increase the surface temperature in that area. However, the contribution of isoprene is a natural phenomena that we cannot stop from happening. Instead, we need to control the emission of greenhouse gases by filtering the gases released from factories and car pools to reduce the usage of the car and other vehicles that may produce more carbon dioxide. That's all from me. I pass to the next presenter.
So now we will go to the impact of global warming. So here we divide it into two categories, which is the sea life and the land animal. For the sea life, the most common impact is the coral reef bleaching. The rising sea temperature and sea level will cause the loss of algae and coral. Algae is very important in maintaining the structure of coral, and when the algae is absent, they will cause the coral to be more fragile, and the coral will appear white or bleached. Thus, many animals that depends on the coral reef will die due to the loss of the algae, which maintain the structure of coral. Other than that, the global warming can also decrease the population of penguin due to the inability to obtain food safely. When the ice is melting due to global warming, the sea level will increase. And thus, when the ice is melting, the distance between the penguins and their own food source will be very far away. And thus, they will decrease the population. And due to the ice melting as well, it will cause the sea level to slowly rise. And in the long term, can cause the sea level to rise in a very high level, to the extent where some islands might be submerged underwater. Then for the land animals, the impact of global warming includes the disruption of migration, hibernation, and reproductive cycles of certain animals. As we all know, some animals depends on the cycle of nature to continue their life. For example, the bears, for example, squirrels, they hibernate during the winter. However, during the global warming, this can interrupt their own hibernation and can cause a lot of other problems. Other than that, human occupation on land can also disrupt the escape route for plants and animals to escape from the global warming. As we all know, humans have taken a lot of places in the world, and due to this occupation, plants and animals that usually migrate to avoid the increasing temperature will be disrupted, and they will not be able to escape it properly. And lastly, farmland and cities will interrupt the movement of species between the habitats. This will cause them to be more to be vulnerable to global warming. And next, this is the research that is done in Antarctica. The method that is used is that you use the crew sampling with the ship RV Australis, which departed from Argentina, to measure the halocarbon across the subantarctic and Antarctic peninsula of the South Pole. And from this research, we found that isoprene is the highest halocarbon found in the Antarctic. Isoprene is a organic compound which can be produced by a lot of living things such as animals and plants. And in the marine ecosystems, especially in the Antarctica, isoprenes are produced by phytoplankton. Due to global warming will lead to the high nutrient absorbed by the phytoplankton during photosynthesis. When the amount of chlorophyll that is inside the phytoplankton is high, the amount of isoprene produced is also high. Isoprene will then be released into the atmosphere and then will react with the emitter to produce the tropospheric ozone gases, which is very harmful to human, and this can cause a lot of other problems, such as diseases and the melting of ice in the said region. All right, so I will move on.
Okay, for the conclusion, global warming is defined as the increase of the average temperature of the atmosphere due to the product of greenhouse effect. Isoprene is one of the gases that produce tropospheric ozone gases that emits harmful effects on living organisms due to the product of climate change. Global warming is a major challenge for our global society. It is predicted to produce a variety of negative effects, including sea level rise, devastation of the habitat of various species, coral bleaching, and many more. Global warming could not be solved easily if people do not very well practice in lowering carbon emission, enforcing law and regulation, implementation of effective forest and agriculture management. As a future scientist, it is encouraged for us to do a lot of research and with hard work and intelligence in order to mitigate this alarming matter. Next. The solution of this issue will be more effective when individuals can change their lifestyle. Individuals can contribute to reduce the changes in global climate by changing their habits. We must try our best to solve this problem and strive as much as possible to reinstate our Earth for the sake of future generations. If we do not act now, we will be facing a lot of detrimental consequences that is done by our own hands. And as a Muslim, it is our responsibility to protect our environment. As mentioned in Surah Ar-Rum, verse 41, corruption has spread on the land and sea as a result of what people's hands have done, so that Allah may cause them to taste the consequences of some of their deeds, and perhaps they might not return to the right path. That's all from us. Thank you for listening and validation our presentation.